Why would God prohibit certain creatures from entering the ark? Is there a deeper divine rationale we're missing? Join us as we delve into the fascinating story of the creature God prohibited from entering the ark. In our journey today, dear viewers, we shall ponder upon a question that has fascinated many across the ages. Why, indeed, would a loving and omniscient God, who takes care to preserve his creation, choose to prohibit certain beings from the refuge of the ark? Could there be a profound divine rationale that escapes our understanding? Stay with us as we embark on this exploration, aiming to unveil the deeper truths hidden within this ancient narrative. At the end of our video, we shall unite in a reflective prayer, seeking wisdom and understanding from the story we explore today. As we begin, let us reflect upon this impactful quote from Revelation chapter 21 verse 8, "But as for the cowardly, the faithless, the detestable, as for murderers, the sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars, their portion will be in the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death." In the grand tapestry of biblical narratives, few stories capture the imagination and convey profound truths like the tale of Noah's Ark. The core of this narrative hinges on the meticulous selection of creatures destined to survive the deluge. We turn our attention first to Genesis chapter 6 verses 19 to 20. "And of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female." Here, we find a divine directive, both explicit and profound. The Creator, in his infinite wisdom, commands Noah to gather pairs of every living entity. Each pair, comprised distinctly of male and female, symbolizes the continuity of life and the inherent order within creation. This passage imparts a poignant lesson about the essence of life's duality and the preservation of species. It speaks volumes about God's intention for sustaining the diversity and richness of life, even amidst impending destruction. Now, let us delve into Genesis chapter 7 verses 14 to 16, which offers a detailed account of the creatures embarking on this fateful journey. "They and every beast, according to its kind, and all the livestock according to their kinds, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, every winged creature. They went into the ark with Noah, 2 and 2 of all flesh in which there was the breath of life. And those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in as God had commanded him. And the Lord shut him in." This passage, rich with specificity, enumerates a comprehensive array of creatures. It is as if the ark becomes a microcosm of the world itself, teeming with the splendor and variety of life. Every beast, livestock, creeping thing, and bird finds a place within this sanctuary, underscoring the inclusivity of God's salvation. The phrase, "breath of life," is particularly evocative, reminding us that these are not mere biological entities, but living beings infused with the divine gift of breath. Furthermore, the entry of these creatures, 2 and 2 of all flesh, underlines the universality and equity in God's plan. None are excluded, so long as the breath of life resides within them. The narrative reaches a hushed climax with the words, "And the Lord shut him in." In this simple yet profound act, we witness the sealing of divine providence. God himself ensures the security and sanctity of the ark, encapsulating Noah, his family, and their precious cargo in a divine embrace. These key biblical texts serve not only as a historical account but as a theological cornerstone. They reveal the meticulous care of the Creator and his unwavering commitment to the preservation of life. Through these verses, we discern the intertwining themes of judgment and mercy, destruction and salvation, chaos and order. As we reflect on the narrative, let us cherish the deeper truths embedded within and recognize our calling to preserve and honor the diversity of life in our world today. My dear reader, let us embark upon a journey, one that stretches back to the ancient soil of primeval history, brimming with the enigmatic whispers of divine command and cosmic upheaval. In the book of Genesis, we find a narrative both haunting and profound, the story of Noah, the Ark, and the Great Flood. Picture, if you will, a world much unlike our own. The earth had become corrupt in God's sight, filled with violence and every manner of wickedness. Like a celestial tapestry marred by dark stains, humanity's moral decay had reached such a state that the Creator regretted making man on the earth. Thus, it was decreed. A cleansing flood would sweep across the land, washing away the iniquities of mankind. Amidst this bleak canvas, a singular figure stands out, Noah. Described as a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, Noah walked faithfully with God. It is within Noah that we find a glimmer of divine hope and mercy. God, in his infinite wisdom and grace, chose Noah to be the harbinger of salvation and renewal. Noah was instructed to build an ark, a massive vessel to preserve a remnant of life. The ark, you see, was not merely a boat. It was a sanctuary. A floating sanctuary designed to endure the tempestuous waters of divine judgment. Constructed of gopher wood, with rooms and coated inside and out with pitch to make it watertight, the ark was to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. This colossal structure was meticulously crafted to house Noah, his family, and a curated selection of the earth's creatures. Now, why did God command Noah to bring specific creatures aboard the ark? This question delves into a deep well of theological reflection and symbolism. In Genesis chapter 6 verses 19 to 20, the command is clear, "And of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female." The preservation of life was paramount, a testament to God's covenant and his enduring promise of renewal. The creatures brought aboard the ark were not chosen haphazardly. Each species, each pair, represented the diversity and richness of God's creation. Male and female, in harmonious balance, symbolized the continuation of life beyond the floodwaters. This divine census of life was more than a pragmatic effort to repopulate the earth, it was a sacred act. Through these creatures, the Almighty demonstrated his sovereign love for all living things, his intent to restore and redeem the fallen world. In addition, Genesis chapter 7 verses 14 to 16 provides a detailed description of the creatures entering the ark. They and every beast after its kind, and all the livestock after their kinds, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth after its kind, and every bird after its kind, every bird of every sort. This remarkable litany underscores the breadth of divine concern, from the grand beasts of the field to the smallest creeping things on earth. No creature was too insignificant to escape the notice of their Creator. This narrative invites us to ponder the mystery and majesty of God's providence. Why, indeed, would he take such pains to preserve a diverse array of creatures? The answer, my dear reader, resides in the very heart of the divine character. God's desire for restoration, his purpose for creation, and his unrelenting commitment to life shine brilliantly through the story of the ark. Thus, in the biblical overview of the flood narrative and the ark's purpose, we encounter profound truths about judgment, mercy, and the indomitable promise of new beginnings. Noah's faithful obedience, the meticulous selection of creatures, and the construction of the ark itself weave together a tale that transcends time, a tale that continues to speak to us today, beckoning us to understand the depth of God's concern for all creation and his unwavering hope for its redemption. one must appreciate that the tale of Noah's Ark does not exist in a vacuum, but finds itself nestled within a rich tapestry of ancient Near Eastern flood stories. To fully grasp the historical context of the biblical flood narrative, we must transport ourselves back to a time where oral traditions wove the fabric of communal belief and shared morality. Consider the Epic of Gilgamesh, an ancient Mesopotamian poem recounting the adventures of its titular hero. In this tale, we encounter Utnapishtim, an antediluvian sage who bears striking resemblances to Noah. Tasked by Ea, a wise god, Utnapishtim constructs a massive vessel to withstand an impending deluge that threatens to obliterate mankind. Just like Noah, he gathers his family and a plethora of animals, ensuring the continuity of life post-flood. Here, we witness mankind's universal struggle against divine retribution and the hope for salvation through obedience and piety. Then, there are the Atrahasis and Eridu Genesis narratives. Atrahasis, another Mesopotamian text, outlines a great flood sent by the god Enlil to curb the burgeoning human population and their cacophonous clamor. Atrahasis receives divine counsel to build a boat, paralleling Noah's divine mission. The resonance between these tales underscores a common cultural anxiety about divine judgment and humanity's survival. A deeper dive into the historical setting reveals a civilization marked by an intimate bond with its natural environment. Floods were a tangible and recurrent threat in the Fertile Crescent, a region abundant in rivers yet prone to perilous inundations. The periodic flooding of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers could yield fertile soil or catastrophic devastation. Such dichotomous experiences naturally birthed narratives reflecting both the wrath and mercy of deities, mirroring the unpredictable temperament of the elements themselves. The biblical flood narrative was forged in this crucible of historical experience and cultural mythos. The ancient Israelites, living amidst and engaging with neighboring civilizations, absorbed and reinterpreted the common motifs of their time. Through the lens of divine inspiration, they cast the flood not merely as an act of indiscriminate wrath, but as a moral reset, underscoring the themes of righteousness, covenant, and redemption that would come to define their unique relationship with the divine. Thus, the historical setting and cultural beliefs at the time the biblical flood story was written were interwoven with the natural world's capriciousness and a shared regional heritage of myth-making. The result was not merely a story of water and survival, but a profound theological statement affirming a God who is deeply invested in the moral order and ultimate restoration of his creation. When we place the biblical narrative alongside its Near Eastern counterparts, we do more than trace similarities. We uncover its distinct voice. In the biblical account, Noah becomes more than a survivor. He embodies faith and obedience to a singular, covenant-making God who promises never again to destroy the earth by flood. It is this covenant, symbolized by the rainbow, that sets the biblical story apart, offering a vision of hope and divine compassion amidst judgment. As we contemplate these ancient stories, let us not merely perceive them as relics of distant pasts, but as enduring echoes of humanity's deepest longings and divine mysteries. In their reflection, we catch glimpses of ourselves and the eternal truths that continue to shape our faith and understanding today. Among the myriad characters and creatures that populate the ancient scriptures, Noah and his family stand as beacons of obedient faithfulness amidst a world engulfed in moral decay. The tale of Noah is not merely a primitive story preserved for its quaintness but a robust narrative teeming with theological significance and human drama. Noah, whose name means rest or comfort, paradoxically embarks upon a colossal undertaking that is anything but restful. In Genesis chapter 6 verse 9, we are told, Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. This walking with God, in an age rife with corruption and violence, sets the stage for a narrative of divine intimacy and human responsibility. Noah's righteousness isn't depicted in grandiose acts but in a quiet, persistent faith and obedience that culminated in the construction of an ark, a monumental task that took decades. His family, too, are not mere appendages to his story but integral participants. Noah's wife, although unnamed, stands with Noah in steadfast solidarity. Their sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their respective wives, represent the nascent stages of human renewal. Together, they symbolize a microcosm of humanity preserved from judgment, a new beginning birthed from divine rescue. In the narrative, the ark becomes a floating sanctuary, a sealed cosmos fraught with symbolism. The creatures that enter the ark are not haphazardly enumerated. Instead, each pair embodies God's creative diversity and wisdom. Genesis chapter 7 verse 14 provides us with an intricate tapestry. They and every beast according to its kind, all the livestock according to their kinds, every creeping thing that creeps on the earth according to its kind, and every bird according to its kind, every winged creature. The detailed categorization signifies an ordered creation, where every living entity has its ordained place and purpose. Consider the clean and unclean animals. Their distinction is laden with theological weight, foreshadowing the Levitical laws to come. Clean animals are seen as suitable for sacrifice, pointing to a future where life and worship intersect. Unclean animals, though also preserved, signal humanity's broader journey to holiness, reminding us that God's grace extends beyond human purity. In a broader symbolism, we see the articulation of divine judgment and mercy. The floodwaters, which cleanse the earth of its iniquity, reflect God's judgment, while the ark, carrying all species under Noah's careful stewardship, epitomizes divine mercy. The preservation of creation despite its fallen state underscores a theme of redemption that courses through the biblical text. Noah himself is occasionally paralleled to Adam, with the ark being a second Eden, a remnant of divine intention floating atop chaotic waters. Just as Adam named the animals, Noah becomes their protector, a custodian of creation, highlighting the enduring covenant between God and humanity. The story of Noah and the intricate symbolism of his epic furnish us with timeless truths. We are reminded of the importance of righteousness, the power of obedience, and the boundless mercy of God, who never abandons his creation. Each character and creature involved in this ancient story tell us that even in judgment, there is hope. Even in destruction, there is the promise of new life. As we ponder these narratives, we too are called to walk with God, ever faithful to his divine purpose. Imagine a grand tapestry, rich with colors and textures, every thread woven with divine intent, each strand imbued with heavenly significance. This tapestry is the theology behind the story of Noah's Ark and the purity laws that God, in his infinite wisdom, ordained. To understand the relevance of these purity laws to the Ark's tale, we must view them not merely as ancient decrees but as reflections of the divine character and cosmic order. The purity laws, meticulously detailed in the Old Testament, embody a deep-seated principle of separateness, of setting aside that which is holy from that which is profane. In Leviticus, we find an extensive codex on what is considered clean and unclean, pure and impure. On the surface, these laws appear as straightforward regulations regarding food, hygiene, and ritual conduct. But, if we peer beneath the surface, we discern a profound spiritual truth: the Creator's desire for his people to remain uncontaminated by the physical and moral corruption that pervades a fallen world. When we turn our gaze to the narrative of the Ark, we witness this principle of divine separation in action. God's selection of creatures to be preserved through the flood was not an arbitrary act but a purposeful delineation between those fit for sacred preservation and those not. The notion of cleanness and uncleanness becomes the yardstick by which life is measured and deemed worthy or unworthy of continuation. In his command to Noah, God instructed the gathering of pairs of all living creatures, delineating explicitly that of the clean animals, Noah should take 7 pairs, while of the unclean, only 1 pair each. This sets a precedent for understanding the ark not merely as a vessel of salvation but as a floating sanctuary, wherein the waters below and the heavens above meet in a microcosm of God's ordained order. This selection of creatures carries profound theological symbolism. The clean animals, often representing purity, holiness, and suitability for sacrifices, prefigure the sacrificial system that would later find its ultimate fulfillment in Christ. They symbolize that which is acceptable, sanctified for the divine covenant. On the other hand, the unclean animals, while still part of God's creation, represent the need for discernment and distinction in the worship and life of his people. Herein lies a significant lesson. The story of the ark becomes an illustration of God's ongoing work of separation and redemption. It echoes the ultimate purification that can only be achieved through divine intervention, a purification that mankind, burdened by sin, cannot attain on its own. Thus, the theological underpinning of the ark underscores a future promise, a messianic hope of ultimate cleansing and recreation. Furthermore, these purity laws and the ark's selection underscore a theological axiom. God's creation, though marred by sin, is still valued and meticulously ordered according to his righteousness. Each creature, clean or unclean, has its place within the grand narrative of redemption. The flood, while an act of judgment, also signifies a renewal of creation, a chance to reset and restore the world to its intended harmony and order. In the grand scheme of the biblical narrative, the ark becomes a symbol of sanctuary in the midst of divine judgment, a vessel of hope in a sea of despair. It is a foretaste of the greater salvation to come, a salvation not just for a chosen few but extended to all through the grace of Christ. Thus, we are invited to see the ark and its inhabitants through the lens of divine purity and holiness. We are beckoned to reflect on our own lives, to discern where and how we might align ourselves more fully with God's holy standard. In doing so, we echo the ancient narrative, becoming living testaments to God's purifying grace and redemptive power. Let us embark upon the journey of theological exploration, guided by the wisdom of the giants who have traversed these sacred texts before us. Among them, few stand as tall and illuminating as Augustine, Thomas Aquinas, and the cadre of modern biblical scholars who, through millennia, have offered profound insights into the divine rationale behind the exclusion of specific creatures from Noah's Ark. Augustine of Hippo, a cornerstone of early Christian thought, approached the story of the flood with a blend of allegory and divine literalism. According to Augustine, the creatures excluded from the ark symbolized the failings and moral decay of humanity, serving as a representation of those cast aside by God's justice. He emphasized the spiritual purity and righteousness required to be deemed worthy of salvation. For Augustine, it was not merely an exclusion of animals, but an exclusion of the sinful and unrepentant. Moving forward in time, we encounter the towering intellect of Thomas Aquinas. The angelic doctor, with his characteristic synthesis of faith and reason, provided a nuanced analysis of the ark's inhabitants. Aquinas posited that the exclusion of certain creatures was in accordance with God's natural law. For him, the journey to exclusion lay in the essence and nature of the creatures themselves, wherein some beings, by divine ordination and their inherent states, were deemed unfit to be preserved. This theological precision reaffirmed the immutable nature of God's laws and the righteous order of creation. In the tapestry of modern biblical scholarship, we find a diverse array of interpretations that continue to enrich our understanding. Scholars today often draw upon historical critical methods, exploring the cultural and historical context surrounding the Noahic narrative. They examine ancient Near Eastern texts, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, noting similarities and divergences that illuminate the unique theological messages in the Genesis account. These modern scholars, standing on the shoulders of Augustine and Aquinas, scrutinize textual variations and the role of mythological creatures within the broader narrative framework. Some interpretations suggest that the exclusion of mythical and unclean creatures reflects a broader theological motif of chaos versus order, where the ark symbolizes a microcosm of divine harmony, and those excluded represent the chaotic forces outside God's sanctified realm. Furthermore, the exclusion reflects deeply embedded purity laws that were instrumental in forming Israel's identity as a people set apart. The insights from these scholars reveal the multi-layered dimensions of the flood story, showing how it operates simultaneously on literal, allegorical, and moral levels. Through the lenses of Augustine's spiritual allegories, Aquinas' natural law, and the meticulous scrutiny of contemporary scholarship, we observe a tapestry far richer than mere exclusion. It is a divine narrative that speaks to the essence of holiness, the boundaries of creation, and the relentless pursuit of order amidst chaos. Thus, as we reflect upon the exclusion of creatures from the ark, we are reminded of the profound spiritual truths that transcend the ages, calling us to ponder the very nature of purity, justice, and salvation in the grand design of God's creation. May these theological insights continue to guide and inspire us as we navigate the mysteries of the sacred texts. Let us now turn our gaze to the traditional view that asserts the exclusion of all unclean and mythological creatures from Noah's Ark, a perspective deeply embedded within biblical and theological evidence. One must begin by understanding the underlying rationale behind the emphasis on clean and unclean creatures in the biblical tradition. In the scriptures, particularly within the Pentateuch, we find meticulous laws surrounding purity. Leviticus chapter 11 provides an exhaustive list of animals deemed clean and unclean by divine decree. These distinctions were far more than mere dietary rules. They represented a broader theological principle within the covenant community. The clean animals were symbolic of spiritual purity and obedience to God's commandments, while the unclean epitomized impurity and moral degradation. Applying this to the narrative of Noah's Ark, God's command to Noah, as detailed in Genesis chapter 7 verses 2-3, to take 7 pairs of every clean animal and only 1 pair of every unclean animal demonstrates an early form of these purity laws. The selection of creatures was not arbitrary, it was imbued with spiritual significance. Only the clean animals would be suitable for sacrifice, and thus, they held a vital role in the post-Diluvian covenant with God. Furthermore, traditional exegesis often cites passages such as Genesis chapter 6 verses 19-20 and Genesis chapter 7 verses 14-16 to argue that the divine mandate was to preserve the sanctity of God's creation, and by extension, His covenant people. To include unclean and mythological creatures within the ark would have symbolically tainted this sanctity, undermining the moral and spiritual order God sought to sustain and renew through Noah. Theologians like Augustine and Thomas Aquinas lend their voices to this traditional perspective. Augustine, in his City of God, posits that the flood was a divine act to cleanse the world of its pervasive corruption, a cleansing that extended to all forms of life, including symbolic representations of evil and chaos embodied by mythological creatures. Aquinas further crystallizes this view in his Summa Theologica, where he emphasizes God's intention to preserve the purity of creation. Drawing from the hierarchy of being and the natural order established by divine law, Aquinas argues that mythological creatures, often depicted as hybrids and abominations within ancient texts, were antithetical to the divine natural order. Their exclusion would be a reaffirmation of God's orderly creation, free from the chaos and corruption they represented. Modern biblical scholars also support this traditional interpretation by employing historical critical methods that juxtapose the biblical account with Near Eastern flood myths. These comparative studies reveal that mythological creatures often symbolized chaotic forces opposed to divine order. In this light, their exclusion from the Ark aligns with the overarching theological narrative of God's triumph over chaos and his establishment of a renewed, orderly creation. Moreover, traditional Jewish thought, as preserved in rabbinic literature, holds a consistent view of maintaining ritual purity. The exclusion of unclean and mythical creatures underscores the importance placed on purity and sanctity, reflecting a continuity of thought from ancient to contemporary interpretations. Thus, the traditional view, firmly grounded in biblical text, theological interpretation, and historical context, upholds the notion that God, in his infinite wisdom, chose to preserve a purified remnant of his creation through Noah's Ark. This act was a prelude to the New Covenant, ensuring that only those creatures emblematic of spiritual and ritual purity would partake in the renewed world post-flood. In conclusion, the arguments supporting the traditional exclusion of unclean and mythological creatures from the Ark are robust and multifaceted. They are deeply entrenched in biblical scripture, theological principles, and historical understanding, all converging to present a coherent narrative that highlights God's unwavering commitment to purity, order, and sanctity within his creation. The tale of Noah and the Ark has long been a cornerstone of biblical lore, encapsulating themes of faith, obedience, and divine judgment. Yet, what if we dared to look beyond the traditional constraints, probing into the challenging tides of alternative theological perspectives? Such explorations, though often met with a wary eye, beckon us to consider the possibility of a broader, more inclusive interpretation of the creatures allowed on the Ark. Picture, if you will, the bustling activity as the Ark's vast wooden frame loomed on the horizon. Many of us have been nurtured on the idea that only clean animals and those free from myth entered its hallowed chambers. However, let us delve into why some theologians now consider a more expansive perspective. Firstly, let's touch on the question of clean versus unclean. The traditional view holds that Noah adhered strictly to the purity laws, bringing aboard only those creatures deemed fit by divine decree. Yet, some scholars argue that this discernment might not have been as rigid and clear-cut as we have long presumed. One aspect often overlooked is the notion that the defining lines of purity were still evolving. The Genesis narrative itself elicits various interpretations, revealing a spectrum rather than a binary divide. What if Noah's criteria for selection encompassed a broader understanding of creation, recognizing the intrinsic value and potential purpose of all living beings, regardless of their clean or unclean status? To illustrate this, let's consider the perspectives posited by modern liberal theologians. They argue that the emphasis of the Ark narrative is not solely on the mechanical adherence to purity laws but on the preservation of life in its multitude of forms. From this angle, the Ark becomes a microcosm of the world, a sanctuary for the eccentric diversity of God's creation. There's also an intriguing idea posited by some theologians which broadens our scope even further: the mythical and the fantastical. Suppose the ancient alloys of imagination and spirituality permitted the coexistence of real and mythical creatures. Some argue that, just as folklores and legendary creatures find their way into our cultural consciousness, the Ark too might have symbolically been a refuge for the wondrous and legendary, merging reality with the elements of divine mythos. This brings us to an essential theological reflection on the idea of inclusivity. The Ark, in its new light, represents a divine embrace of all creation's splendor. Does not the providence of God extend beyond our human categorizations and encompass a love that intertwines all aspects of existence, whether tangible or intangible? Diving deeper, let's consider the perspectives from liberation theologians. They bring forth the idea that focusing too narrowly on cleanliness overlooks the broader message of divine grace and salvation that the Ark embodies. Their interpretation shifts the discourse from meticulous legalism to the grander narrative of mercy and rescue, an allegory of God's unwavering commitment to safeguard the marginalized, the obscure, and the misunderstood. Historical critical methods applied to the Ark narrative also challenge us to view it within the cultural and mythological context of its time. Analyzing ancient texts reveals that many societies had flood myths which included a gamut of creatures, both ordinary and mythic, supported by the belief that such beings coexisted within the sacred weave of their world. Thus, when considering the Ark, it's plausible that the ancient audience envisaged a scene more inclusive and fantastical than our current interpretations allow. These alternative theological perspectives don't aim to diminish the narrative's integrity. Rather, they enrich our understanding, providing a more nuanced and encompassing view of God's creation. They call us to ponder the broader implications of divine love, urging us to embrace the multitude and the complexity of life. As we navigate these contemplations, let us remember that the question isn't just about who entered the Ark, but what the Ark represents in the vast, intricate tapestry of divine providence and grace. Each creature, each narrative twist, invites us into a deeper reflection on inclusivity, mercy, and the boundless embrace of God's love. So, let us be open to re-examining one of the most profound stories in our faith, embracing the potential for broader insights and inclusive revelations that reflect the magnitude of divine wisdom and compassion. In our quest to understand the divine narrative of Noah's Ark, it is essential to delve into comparative religious beliefs and ancient myths. The flood story found in the Bible is not an isolated account. Rather, it shares remarkable similarities with other ancient legends, most notably the Epic of Gilgamesh. The biblical flood narrative and the Epic of Gilgamesh both tell of a great deluge sent by the gods to cleanse the earth. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, we encounter the tale of Utnapishtim, a man chosen by the gods to build an enormous boat to save himself, his family, and a collection of animals from the impending flood. This resonates strongly with the story of Noah, who was similarly chosen by God to construct an ark for the purpose of preserving life. These parallels are not mere coincidences. They provide a window into the shared human experience and the common spiritual concerns of ancient civilizations. Both stories emphasize themes of divine judgment, human fallibility, and the hope for renewal through faithful obedience. When examining these tales, we also notice variations that reflect the distinct theological frameworks of the cultures from which they emerged. The gods in the Epic of Gilgamesh display capriciousness, often acting out of personal grievances or whims, whereas the God of the Bible exhibits purposeful intent aligned with moral righteousness and compassion for humankind. Beyond the Epic of Gilgamesh, other major religions offer intriguing flood narratives that further enrich our understanding. In Hinduism, the story of Manu mirrors Noah's tale, featuring a righteous man who is warned of a great flood and instructed to preserve life by building a boat. Similar motifs of divine forewarning and salvation are present, underscoring universal archetypes of destruction, redemption, and restoration. Meanwhile, Islamic tradition acknowledges Noah, known as Na in Arabic, as an important prophet. The Quran recounts the flood story with significant similarities to the biblical account, while also incorporating unique elements that highlight Noah's unwavering faith and the moral lessons intended for humanity. Through these comparative lenses, it becomes evident that the flood narrative taps into profound spiritual truths that resonate across cultures and epochs. The consistent presence of these stories in diverse religious texts points to a shared longing within the human spirit to understand the divine, seek redemption, and find meaning amidst life's adversities. As we reflect upon these narratives, let us recognize the common threads that bind us together as seekers of truth. Regardless of the religious or cultural context, these ancient stories invite us to ponder the greater realities beyond our immediate understanding and to hold fast to the virtues of faith, obedience, and hope. When one speaks of archaeological discoveries, images of dusty tombs and ancient manuscripts flicker through the mind. Such treasures, unearthed from the sands of time, hold the whispers of ages past and the echoes of civilizations long gone. Within these discoveries lie keys to understanding even the most enigmatic of biblical narratives, including the tale of the Ark and the creatures God prohibited from entering it. As we delve into the annals of archaeological history, our journey begins with the numerous flood myths that pervaded the ancient world. One of the most famous of these is the Epic of Gilgamesh, an epic poem from Mesopotamia that predates the biblical account of Noah's Ark. Within its cuneiform tablets, we find striking parallels with Genesis, a great flood, a hero instructed to build a vessel, and the preservation of life upon it. These historical fragments are not mere curiosities but torchlights that illuminate the broader cultural tapestry from which the biblical flood narrative was woven. They offer a glimpse into an ancient worldview that comprehended cataclysmic floods as divine orchestration, as moments of divine judgment and renewal. Among the poignant archaeological findings near the ancient city of Ur, where Abraham once walked, one discovery stands out: a Sumerian list of kings, inscribed on clay tablets, that records a great flood sweeping over the land. This corroborates the widespread memory of a deluge that reshaped entire civilizations. Artifacts such as these compel us to see Noah's Ark not as an isolated narrative but as part of a grander, shared human experience of surviving and understanding cataclysmic events. The ways ancient peoples encoded these experiences into myth and record were their attempts at grappling with transcendent realities, much as we do today. Now, let us turn our attention to the specific question of mythical creatures and their exclusion from sanctuaries, including the Ark. Archaeological inscriptions from various cultures, such as those found in the ruins of Nineveh, depict an array of mythical beings, a fascinating bestiary including griffins, dragons, and sea monsters. These mythical creatures weren't merely the fabrications of fanciful minds but were deeply enmeshed in the religious and cultural beliefs of the ancient world. They symbolized chaos, the untamed aspects of creation, and often stood in stark opposition to the order represented by the divine. For instance, in the Babylonian creation epic Enuma Elish, the god Marduk battles the chaos dragon Tiamat to bring order to the cosmos. This brings us to an understanding of why such creatures were excluded from sanctuaries. They were emblematic of the very forces that ancient peoples believed the divine sought to subdue or eliminate. Thus, Noah's mission to bring pairs of every living thing into the Ark excluded these symbolically tumultuous creatures, for the Ark was a vessel of divine order and preservation. This was not merely about physical survival but about maintaining a divinely orchestrated harmony amidst impending chaos. Furthermore, the inscriptions from the palaces of Assyrian kings often portray mythical creatures at the gateways of sanctuaries and temples. These figures served a dual purpose. They were guardians warding off evil, yet they were also reminders of the chaos that lay beyond the sacred precincts. By excluding such beings from the Ark, the narrative emphasizes the delineation between holy and profane, between order and chaos. one cannot overlook the discovery of ancient Jewish texts, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls, which expand our understanding of Jewish thought during the Second Temple period. In these texts, references to mythical beings and their exclusion provide further insights into Jewish eschatology and the perception of divine order. These archaeological discoveries together weave a complex and rich background tapestry against which the story of Noah's Ark unfolds. They lend credibility and depth to the biblical narrative, grounding it in a world where myth and reality, divine judgment and salvation were part of the lived experience of ancient peoples. In conclusion, the artifacts and inscriptions unearthed by archaeologists remind us that these ancient narratives were not merely stories but reflections of profound human attempts to understand the divine and the natural world. By studying these relics of the past, we gain greater insight into the sacred scriptures, the mythical creatures that stood as symbols of chaos, and the divine order that sought to transcend and transform it. In the academic realm, the story of the flood as presented in the Bible is not merely accepted at face value. It undergoes thorough scrutiny, analysis, and debate. Scholars, theologians, and archaeologists alike have for centuries delved into this ancient narrative, examining its every facet to uncover deeper truths and historical accuracies. Firstly, let us consider the impact of archaeological discoveries on the traditional interpretations of the flood story. Archaeology, the silent reader of past civilizations, offers a tangible connection to our ancestors. Spanning vast deserts and deep beneath layers of earth, archaeologists have unearthed artifacts and inscriptions that lend credence to the antiquity and cultural significance of the flood narratives. Some of these findings resonate strongly with the biblical account, such as flood layers in Mesopotamian cities that align with the timeline of the narrative. Tablets like the Epic of Gilgamesh, preserved through the ages, echo the tale of a great deluge remarkably similar to Noah's story. These instances support the notion that tales of a great flood were not isolated to one culture but were a shared memory of catastrophic events. However, the academic approach is not to validate or invalidate through partial discovery but to approach with a rigorous hypothesis-testing mentality. While some findings support the traditional interpretation of a historical flood, others pose questions or present contradictions. For instance, the varying depictions of the flood's extent, local versus global, provoke discussions on the scope and impact of the event. The discovery of different flood layers in various regions suggests multiple flood events rather than a single, worldwide deluge. These archaeological endeavors introduce a spectrum of interpretations. Some scholars propose that the flood narratives may reflect regional flooding events that were later mythologized into a singular, grand narrative. This viewpoint is supported by geological evidence that indicates significant but localized flooding events in ancient times, which could easily inspire legends of a colossal, divine flood. On the other hand, certain scholars argue for the coherence and unity of the biblical account, suggesting that the global nature of the flood, as depicted in Genesis, holds symbolic rather than purely literal significance. They posit that the narrative aims to convey theological and moral truths about human corruption, divine judgment, and redemption, rather than serve as a straightforward historical account. This brings us to the array of academic perspectives on the flood story. Traditionalists maintain that the biblical account should be interpreted through a lens of historical literalism, emphasizing faith in the divine revelation. They argue that while archaeological evidence adds layers of understanding, it should not overshadow the spiritual and theological lessons embedded within the narrative. Meanwhile, a more critical scholarly approach includes examining the story through the prisms of myth, literature, and comparative religion. These scholars explore similarities between the Genesis flood narrative and other ancient myths, analyzing structural and thematic parallels. They suggest that these similarities indicate a common ancestral memory or shared cultural motifs, presenting the biblical flood as part of a broader mythological tapestry. Still, others propose that the narrative serves multiple functions: historical, literary, and theological, each layer adding depth and breadth to its understanding. This perspective emphasizes a holistic approach, recognizing the historical elements while also valuing the narrative's capacity to convey profound spiritual truths across generations. In the midst of these debates, what remains evident is the flood story's enduring resonance. It captivates, challenges, and speaks to the human condition, our understanding of virtue and vice, judgment and mercy. The academic discourse, though complex, underscores the rich, multifaceted nature of this ancient narrative and its capacity to provoke thought, evoke faith, and inspire reflection. As we tread the path of scholarly inquiry, let us remember that the quest for understanding is a celebration of our God-given intellect and curiosity. The story of Noah's Ark, viewed through the many lenses of archaeology, theology, and literature, continues to be a wellspring of insight and inspiration, reminding us of our humble place within the vast tapestry of creation. Let us embark on a contemplative journey into the realm of miraculous events, particularly those that divine selection and exclusion encompass. A realm where the hand of God moves with deliberate intention and profound purposefulness. In the annals of biblical history, these events stand as beacons that illuminate the divine character and the principles by which our world is governed. They serve as testament to a higher wisdom, one that chooses and discards, bestows grace, and withholds it, all in accordance with an ultimate, righteous will. Consider the narrative of Noah's Ark, a story familiar yet perpetually awe-inspiring. Here we observe a divine act of selection on a grand scale. God calls upon Noah, deemed righteous in a corrupt generation, to construct an ark. This vessel becomes the cradle of a new beginning, a sanctuary for the renewal of life post-deluge. The creatures that enter the ark are chosen meticulously. 2 of every kind, both male and female, enter this divine refuge. Yet, we must ponder those left outside, the exclusion that is simultaneously an act of divine omission. This exclusion is no mere oversight but an intentional reminder of God's sovereignty and moral order. Historical examples further underscore this theme. In the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, we witness another divine act of selection and exclusion. Lot and his family are selected for salvation, angels guiding them out from the impending destruction. The rest, those steeped in wickedness, face a fate of fiery devastation, their exclusion from mercy heralding the severity of divine justice. Theological implications of these events invite us to a deeper understanding of God's nature. They signify that divine grace is not hapless nor arbitrary but discerned and allotted according to divine wisdom and justice. It reveals a God who is involved in human history, who judges morally and acts decisively. One might find echoes of this divine pattern in the New Testament. Jesus, in selecting his disciples, demonstrates selective inclusion. These 12, chosen from ordinary walks of life, are called to an extraordinary journey of faith. Judas' later exclusion from the communion resonates deeply, a reminder of the grievous weight of betrayal and the grave consequences it elicits. In contemplating these miraculous events, we are encouraged to reflect upon the profound interplay of divine mercy and judgment. We see a God who saves, who redeems, but also a God who righteously judges and excludes. This duality offers a fuller portrait of the divine, one that encompasses a spectrum of holy attributes. Ultimately, these narratives challenge us. As modern readers, the tales of divine selection and exclusion confront us with questions about our own lives and moral standings. Are we living in a manner aligned with divine expectations? Shall we find ourselves selected for divine grace or excluded from it? In embracing the lessons from these miraculous events, let us strive for lives that mirror the righteousness esteemed by God, ever mindful of the grave implications of being excluded from His sanctuary. Thus, we walk more faithfully, ever seeking the sanctuary of His grace. In pondering the tale of Noah's Ark, one cannot help but contemplate its enduring impact on faith and practice today. Just as it loomed as a colossal instrument of salvation in the ancient world, the Ark continues to be a significant symbol that permeates our spiritual consciousness. Impact on personal faith. When we consider the story of the Ark, it is more than a mere historical account. It is a testament of divine obedience and unwavering faith. Noah's absolute trust in God's command to build an enormous vessel, despite the mockery and disbelief of his contemporaries, serves as an enduring example. His steadfast faith amidst widespread skepticism encourages believers to trust in God's plan, even when it transcends human understanding. The narrative beckons us to reflect upon our personal relationship with the divine. It prompts contemplations about our convictions. Are we, like Noah, willing to trust and act upon God's will even when it seems irrational to others or incites ridicule? The Ark becomes a metaphor for clinging to faith amidst life's turbulent deluge, assuring that divine providence will prevail. The personal application of this tale is incumbent upon each believer to navigate their spiritual journey with determination and faithfulness akin to Noah. Collective religious practices. On a communal level, the story of the Ark enriches religious practices and rituals. Within numerous faith traditions, gathering as a community to recount and celebrate this narrative solidifies collective beliefs and fortifies a sense of unity. It is often during shared retellings of such profound stories that a congregation finds mutual encouragement and reinforcement of their common faith. In religious observances, the Ark symbolizes sanctuary and divine protection, urging communities to embrace fidelity to God's mandates. The collective worship inspired by this account often involves prayers for resilience, blessings of faith, and divine guidance, drawing parallels between Noah's steadfastness and the congregation's endeavors to adhere to spiritual tenets. Moral lessons. Moreover, the moral lessons derived from the Ark narrative are manifold and resonate with perennial truths. At its core, it underscores the consequences of human wickedness juxtaposed against the righteousness that finds favor with God. Believers are reminded of the virtues of integrity, obedience, and faithfulness, while also acknowledging the repercussions of moral corruption. The story further instills the imperative of stewardship over God's creation. Noah's meticulous care to preserve each species echoes modern calls for ecological responsibility and the sacred duty to protect and sustain all life. In this respect, the Ark becomes an archetypal symbol not only of divine salvation but also of our irrevocable duty towards the environment. Thus, in personal faith and collective practice, and through the moral lessons it imparts, the story of Noah's Ark remains a profound influence. It is a narrative that transcends time, continually nurturing faith, unifying communities, and guiding humanity towards moral and spiritual perseverance. As we reflect on the tale, may it embolden us to remain steadfast in our faith, to find unity in collective worship, and to commit unwaveringly to the virtues it extols. Through the enduring legacy of the Ark, we find both refuge and inspiration in our ongoing spiritual voyage. The story of Noah's Ark has captivated the imagination and faith of countless generations. It stands not only as a testament of divine judgment and mercy but also as a wellspring of inspiration for artists, writers, and cultural creators throughout the centuries. From the earliest days of Christian art, Noah's Ark has been a pervasive motif, appearing in mosaics, frescoes, and stained glass windows, each artist striving to capture the dramatic essence of the biblical flood. In the solemn halls of medieval cathedrals, one may find intricate depictions of Noah's vessel riding the tumultuous waves, a symbol of salvation amid chaos. These artistic representations serve as visual sermons, guiding the viewers to contemplate the weighty themes of sin, judgment, and divine grace. As literature evolved, so did the representations of Noah's tale. The Ark found its way into the works of many great writers, from John Milton's epic, Paradise Lost, where the flood is portrayed as both a tool of destruction and renewal, to the more whimsical retellings found in children's literature. Each rendition brings with it a new layer of interpretation and meaning, highlighting different aspects of the ancient story. In modern times, Noah's Ark has transcended its religious origins, permeating popular culture in movies, cartoons, and even comic books. We find humor and irreverence alongside reverence and respect, with stories that reimagine the Ark in post-apocalyptic settings or as a spaceship carrying the last remnants of humanity. These contemporary depictions often reflect the anxieties and hopes of our times, using the archetypal narrative as a canvas to explore themes of environmental crisis, human responsibility, and the search for redemption. Modern culture also interprets the story through various artistic mediums, from music to theater. Songs recounting the journey of Noah and his family, stage productions reenacting the deluge, and sculptural installations capturing the moment when land is sighted again. All these echo the eternal resonance of the Ark's story. The fascination with Noah's Ark persists because it speaks to something fundamental within the human soul. The Ark is more than a mere vessel. It is a symbol of hope in the face of inevitable trials, a reminder that amid judgment, there is always the promise of salvation for the faithful. Artistic and literary depictions, whether ancient or modern, invite us to reflect upon these eternal truths and to see within the old story new insights for our lives today. Perhaps it is precisely in this multiplicity of representations that the enduring power of the story lies. Every artist, writer, and creator who engages with the tale of Noah's Ark adds to the rich tapestry of interpretation, weaving a narrative that transcends time and culture, continually inviting humanity to ponder the mysteries of divine providence and human destiny. As we draw our discussion to a close, let us turn our minds back to the key points we have traversed in this exploration of the creature God prohibited from entering the Ark. First, we delved into the biblical texts, the immutable words from Genesis, where we understood the divine instructions given to Noah. We saw the gravity of the divine command, "And of every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female." This directive, simple yet profound, underscores the importance of obedience to God's will. Then, we journeyed through the historical context, transporting ourselves back to the time when these narratives were more than mere stories but deeply held truths that shaped cultures and faith. We examined parallels in Near Eastern flood myths, enriching our understanding by comparing the biblical account with those ancient tales. Our theological inquiry brought us to consider the purity laws and the symbolic meanings behind the selection of creatures. We reflected on the wisdom of influential theologians such as Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, whose insights continue to illuminate our understanding today. We also entertained and scrutinized different viewpoints, from the steadfast traditional interpretations to more progressive or inclusive readings of the creatures allowed on the Ark. These debates help us appreciate the richness and complexity of biblical scholarship. Our consideration of comparative religious beliefs and archaeological discoveries expanded our horizons, offering us glimpses of how other cultures and religions have interpreted similar flood narratives. These elements added depth to our discussion, providing a broader perspective on the universal themes of divine judgment and salvation. Throughout, we acknowledged the miraculous nature of these events, recognizing the deep impact they have on personal faith and collective religious practices. The story of Noah's Ark teaches us about divine mercy, human responsibility, and the moral imperatives that transcend time and culture. As we reflect on these insights, we can see that the tale of Noah's Ark is not just an ancient story but a continuing source of spiritual wisdom. It calls us to a deeper understanding of God's will and commands us to live our lives with faith, obedience, and a commitment to righteousness. Before we part, I encourage you to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your engagement is vital to our collective journey in faith. Also, do suggest any future topics you'd like us to explore. Together, we can delve deeper into the wonders and wisdom of the Scriptures. Thank you for joining us in this spiritual exploration. Heavenly Father, we come before you with open hearts, seeking wisdom and understanding from your word. As we ponder the mysteries of your divine selection and the story of Noah's Ark, we ask for clarity and insight. Help us to embrace the lessons behind these ancient narratives and to apply their teachings to our lives with faith and obedience. May we always be mindful of your guidance and strive to live according to your will. We pray for your continued blessings and protection over all your creation. In Jesus' name, we pray. Amen.